Breaking news tonight on the government shutdown. After weeks of saying he would not negotiate, the president today held a news conference where he signaled he might be ready to make some sort of deal. This as outrage spreads over parts of this shutdown, including news that we brought to you earlier, that the Pentagon will not pay some of the death benefits to families of at least 5 military heroes who were killed this week fighting for our country. California Congressman and Marine combat vet Duncan Hunter outraged over this. Here he is on our show moments ago.
This is an on purpose, in your face, middle finger, as you said so eloquently, to the military families. I mean, this is nothing other than that.
Joining me now, Fox News political analyst Kirsten Powers and Fox News digital politics editor Chris Steyerwalt, live in our D.C. bureau. And so, I mean, it's such a turnoff. It's so gross, really. You know, I mean, really, you couldn't even get that right. Now, what are we going to do? We can't pay for the funerals of our fallen heroes, and everybody's doing one of these. Everybody's doing one of these, Chris.
Well, look, they didn't get any smarter down here, Counselor, while you were away. And in fact, maybe they got a little dumber. And what's happening now is the gross miscalculation that took place in this administration as it relates to how this shutdown, partial shutdown, would play out as it goes forward. We learned something in the sequestration, those automatic caps on automatic increases in federal spending. We learned something, which was this all involves choices. This all involves the administration of these cuts or these caps. And so now we're litigating that issue.
You can't you can't choose. In no way can you choose to give the short end to the families of our fallen heroes and get away with it. And I don't, you know, Kirsten, Duncan Hunter says this is the Pentagon's doing, that this is a matter of discretion. The Pentagon says this is Congress's doing, and that they tried to highlight to the Congress that this was going to happen. But the bottom line is the families of these 5 fallen heroes are stuck wondering how they're going to get to Dover Air Force Base without a private donation, which thankfully it does look like they are getting.
Right. Well, obviously this is terrible. This is the last thing that they need after having just lost a loved one, and it's not the way that they should be treated. So, you know, it's hard to understand exactly what the problem is. These claims that there's some sort of legal holdup, but we're talking about 5 families. It just doesn't seem like something that they can't get around, where they could actually provide them with what they need and give them the money that they're supposed to receive, and the travel and everything.
They can't get out of their own way. You would think, I mean, that's what Duncan Hunter was saying, that he thinks Chuck Hagel could easily say this is a matter of discretion. And of course we're going to pay for these benefits. As I understand it, it's about $100,000 for each family that they're entitled to, that we promise them before they go fight for us in Afghanistan. We promise them if something happens to them, this will be paid to their loved ones. And now that they're dead, we've reneged on the promise. I mean, I'm sorry to put too fine a point on it, but that is what's happening. I want to stand you two by, because I told the audience we were going to have Colonel Oliver North, and he is here with us now, because we wanted to hear from you, Ollie. Colonel, I know that you're upset about this. Everyone is. You think the president has something to do with this, that he actually could have a hand in undoing this. Tell us.
Very quickly. It's unforgivable that the DOD is not paying to transport the families of these servicemen and women killed in action to Dover. There can be no excuse for what they've just done. Thankfully, generous Americans are helping to make sure that family members can be there. The Special Operations Warrior Foundation and Freedom Alliance have both offered to help defray the transportation costs for these families, for these 4 soldiers and that Marine who were killed this weekend. Now look, there are some who are trying to make this a political issue, Megan, but it's much more than that. This isn't about the government shutdown. It's about whether the commander-in-chief gives a damn about the morale of our troops. That's what it really comes down to. Those who are serving in harm's way and their families, and the morale of those families. It does not take an act of Congress to authorize this travel by the dependents of the families of our dead or our wounded. All it takes is a commander-in-chief with a conscience, because the chief executive of the United States can do it with the stroke of a pen on a presidential emergency action document. He could have done it yesterday. He could do it now, and those families would be covered.
You know, this is what Duncan Hunter was suggesting in his letter, that he wrote to Chuck Hagel saying, you are deflecting your responsibility. And he said, insisting that Congress is needed to fix this situation overstates the complexity of this problem and deflects responsibility. And let me just take it to a larger place, Kirsten, because what we're seeing now is the real effects of this government shutdown, for which, responsibility, there's plenty to be spread around. But is that why this example, the World War II vets, the growing outrage in the country, is that why now we seem to be hearing the politicians today talk about, well, maybe there'll be some sort of a talk in some way under some conditions, maybe?
Yeah, look, this is bad for the country. There's no question. The government shutdown is bad. We can go through all the different people who are affected by it, the NIH, CDC, Meals on Wheels, everything that you're raising is all obviously very bad. And I think the president has finally realized he's going to have to probably give a little on this, though he's not giving that much. He's basically saying, let's extend let's stop the shutdown and let's do a short-term extension for the debt ceiling, and then let's talk. And that seems pretty reasonable to me, but I'm not sure if the Republicans are going to be receptive to it.
The thing is that the Republicans have been going out there, Chris, and hammering this. They won't negotiate. All we want is for them to negotiate. Let's just talk. That's all. That's all we want. And whether it's true or it's not, or it's spin, that's been their messaging. And we heard Rand Paul in an open mic moment talking about how he felt that was an effective message for them. We just keep saying we want to talk, and they keep saying that they won't negotiate. When you get stories of, the families of dead service members wondering how they're going to bury their loved ones, how they're going to provide the funerals for their loved ones, and won't be able to show up at Dover Air Force Base to receive the remains, and you get the president standing out there saying, I'm not going to negotiate. Now, I understand why he's saying that, and the principle upon which he's standing. The question is what effect that has on the American people.
Well, the principle on which he said he was standing today in his press conference was that he did not want to give the Republicans political advantage in this. He wasn't talking specifically about this. He was talking about the Republican efforts currently to reopen parts of the government that are entirely non-controversial, about things like cancer research, things that everybody would like to have reopened, like providing aid to the families of people killed in the line of duty. So, come on. So the president says to a question today at the press conference, why won't you do it? And his answer was, well, they're just doing this to take the pressure off politically, so I don't want to help them. And it was a sort of a jaw-dropper moment where you thought, well, if we're talking about all gamesmanship here, if we're talking about all of this is just falderall, then do something. If it doesn't matter, then just sign it. Just put it into law. And I guarantee you there are plenty of Democrats in the House of Representatives who are sick and tired of having to vote against legislation to fund things that are popular.
Raise your hand if you know what falderall means.
I said it.
Ollie?
Megan, I'm just stunned by this, because to have it happening in the midst of a war and have it ignored by our colleagues in the mainstream media is egregious. Thanks to Julian Barnes and Alison Prang at the Wall Street Journal, Greta and you, Megan, for giving this issue some visibility. But this afternoon, Chris just mentioned it, the president droned on for almost an hour about standoffs and negotiations and ransom. But unless I missed it, not one of our mainstream media colleagues even asked him about this outrage. And it's bad enough that the executive branch is playing games, cynical as they are, about monuments and memorials in our Capitol, opening and closing them at will. But it's unconscionable for the White House and the Pentagon to deny those who make real sacrifices for our nation a moment of solace as they grieved over the lost loved ones.
And yet, Kirsten, that their response to that would be, we're not the ones who shut down the government. That's their position. They believe that it was the Republicans in Congress, and that they are the ones who have to live with the consequences of the shutdown.
Well, everyone has to live with the consequences of the shutdown. Unfortunately, I do think the Republicans are the one who brought it on with all of the Obamacare demands. But that's kind of behind us now at this point. And so I think it's more about trying to move forward, figure out a way to move forward. And I just find the issue of how these families are being treated very hard to believe that it can't be fixed easily. Do you know what I mean? It's one of those things that just seems like it could be fixed very, very easily, and there really shouldn't be. It's not a right-left issue. I think it's something that we all could agree needs to be fixed, and I'm very hopeful that they will.
But that's
step
what
up
leads
and
you to
fix
have
it
questions
quickly.
about motivations, because it should be easy. And so why is it not? Why doesn't somebody just pick up the phone and say, take care of it. Listen, take care of it. I mean, Duncan Hunter
hopefully
claims
someone is doing
covered.
that. Yeah, I mean, the idea that you can't, at a bare minimum, they have to be there when the bodies come back. I mean, these are immediate things. You could maybe say the $100,000 issue, well, they could get to that in a week or something. But the other stuff, the funerals, the getting there for the bodies, that's immediate. That's an immediate need, and it needs to be taken care of.
And you know what? It's a fraud. It's a fraud on our servicemen and women to whom promises were made, and that their loved ones would be taken care of, and that these things would be taken care of, so their families didn't have to deal with it. God forbid something were to happen to them, and in this case, for these 5 servicemen and women, it did. Panel, thank you all.
You bet.
Thank you.